Good morning, students. Now I shall be discussing about the remaining portion of Java GUI components. So let's now start with the Jlabel class. This Jlabel class represents the label control. So the instance or the object of the Jlabel class represents the label control or the label component in the Java GUI applications. The label component is one of the very commonly used component in GUI applications. This label component is used to display the static text or caption on a form. Now if you look at this design window, it consists of a frame. The frame acts as a container control for the labels, for the list box, for the text field and the text area, as well as the button. Now the title shown here and the name shown here represents the label controls inside this frame. The first label control displays the static text title, and the second label control displays the static text name. And each of these two label controls are embedded inside this frame control because the frame acts as a container control for each of these controls. Now let's discuss about the properties of the Jlabel class. As the Jlabel represents the label control, so the label control will have these following methods. The first method is identified as setText. The purpose of this method to set the caption for the label, and it takes one parameter of type string. Now as the class representing the label control is identified as Jlabel, so at first we have to create an object of this class called Jlabel. Let's denote the object or the instance of this class Jlabel as Jlabel1. So here this is the instance or the object belonging to the class Jlabel. So here Jlabel1 is the object or the instance of our Jlabel class, and with the help of this object called Jlabel1, it is calling the setText method. To set the text, it is nice to learn swing as the caption for the label. And if I have to do it here for this label, then I have to check the properties window for this label. So at first I shall select this label, and now I shall see the properties window. Now see, under the list of possible options here, I shall see the option text. By default the text shown here is title. Now I'm going to change this, and let me change it to it's nice to learn swing. So here is the text corresponding to the label identified as Jlabel1. Now after setting this text, I shall click on this OK button. Now see, on doing that, you can see the change in the text corresponding to the first label. Previously the text that was displayed for this label was title. Now the text title has changed into it's nice to learn swing, because the changes I have done is in the option text in the properties window, and here is the change that I have done. Then come to the next method called getText. This method returns the text of a label. Now say the text contains this string called it is nice to learn swing. Now in order to return this text from the label, I have to make use of the getText method. And since the object for our label is Jlabel1, so with the help of this object which is Jlabel1, I shall call the getText method using the dot operator like this. And this method grabs the content or the text inside the label, and then it stores it in a string variable called s. Okay, so once the label object identified as Jlabel1 grabs the text inside that label using the getText method, it returns the text into a different string variable known as s. So if the text inside the label object is "it is nice to learn swing," okay, that text shall be returned using this getText method and stored in this string variable called s. Okay, as a result, if the label contains the text "it is nice to learn swing," in that case the string variable s shall also contain the string "it is nice to learn swing." Now let's come to the next method, which is setEnabled. This method is used to activate and deactivate the label. Okay, and it takes one parameter of type boolean, where the boolean value can be either true or false. So now if I wish to activate this label object Jlabel1, I have to write a statement as Jlabel1.setEnabled, and the boolean value should be true. So the boolean option true shall enable this label object Jlabel1, but if I put the boolean value as false, then that will disable the label object called Jlabel1. Then come over here. This is the next method of the Jlabel class, which is setVisible. The use of this method is to make the label visible or invisible. Okay, and it is represented like this. If the label object's name is Jlabel1, okay, we use the label object Jlabel1 and then call the setVisible method using the dot operator and put the argument as true if I wish to make the label as visible. But in case if I wish to make the label object Jlabel1 as invisible, I have to put false in place of true. Now let's come to the next component of the NetBeans window, which is the text field. The text field component is represented with the help of the Jtextfield class. So the instance of this Jtextfield class represents a text box component in the Java GUI applications. The text box accepts user input in an application. Now take the case of this form. Okay, this particular form consists of a container control known as the frame, which is this rectangular shaped gray colored region. This container control embeds different types of controls. The first one is the label control, okay, such as title and the name. The second one is the list box control, okay, holding these items, that is Mr., Mrs. and Miss. Then the next one is the text field control or the text box control, okay, which we are just discussing about. Then the next one is the button control specified by this text add, and then this is the text area control. The only difference between this text field control or the text box control and this text area control is that the text box control can accept only single line of text, whereas this text area control can accept multiple lines of text as well. Okay, but now the control that we are discussing about is this control, which is the text box control, and the class which represents this text box control is the Jtextfield. So here it is. This is the Jtextfield class that represents this text box. Now this text box can accept user inputs. So let's check it out. For that, let me run this application. Now see, this is the text box control, okay, which is represented with the help of the Jtextfield class, and since it accepts user input, so I'm going to type some alphabets from the keyboard. Okay, now see, it's accepting the alphabets. It is also accepting some numbers. Okay, it is even accepting some special characters. Okay, see, all these are the user inputs. Okay, and since it is me who is typing these inputs, so I am the user here. So any particular user, okay, who wishes to use this text box control can type the inputs here. Now let's discuss about the properties of the Jtextfield class that represents the text box control. The first property is the method setText, okay, which sets the text for the text field object. Now, considering this Jtextfield class, if we create an instance or an object of this class, okay, by the name Jtextfield1, we can then use this object to call the method setText using the dot operator like this. This is represented as Jtextfield1.setText. And if I wish to set the text inside that text field, as it is nice to learn about swing controls, I have to simply put this string as argument within inverted quote, okay, like this. So the statement is Jtextfield1.setText with the argument it is nice to learn about swing controls, okay, within inverted quote followed by semicolon. Now let's check it out. So here is this text box control inside this form. Now just click on this text box control, okay, look at the properties window. Now inside the properties window I can see the option text here, okay. By default it is blank. Since it is blank, so nothing gets displayed inside this text box control. Now if I wish to put this text, it is nice to learn swing controls, okay, then I shall copy it from here and paste it out here, okay, to add that as a text. And once I have pasted this text here, I shall click on this OK button, okay, and on doing that you can see the text, okay, which is it is nice to learn about swing controls, okay, getting displayed inside this text box control. So this statement creates an object or an instance specified by the name Jtextfield1 of the Jtextfield class, and then it calls the setText method to set the text it is nice to learn about swing control inside the text box. Then come to the next method, which is the getText method. This method returns the text of the text field object, okay. Now say for instance, if the text box contains this string it is nice to learn about swing controls, then with the help of this instance or the object specified by the name Jtextfield1, I shall call the getText method to return the value, okay, which is this particular string inside the text box, and store it in a string variable called s. Now once the value gets returned using the getText method from the text box control into the string variable s, then the string variable s shall also contain this string it is nice to learn about swing controls. Then the next method is setEnabled. This method is used to activate or deactivate the text field. For activating the text field, simply use the object or the instance of the Jtextfield class, okay, and that in this case is Jtextfield1, and then call the setEnable method, put the option as true, okay, where true is the boolean value. Now if you wish to deactivate the text box or the text field, then instead of putting true as the boolean value, put false. So false shall disable the text field object or the text box object. Then come below, see this setVisible method. So the use of this method is to make the text field visible or invisible. If you wish to make the text field as visible, okay, use the Jtextfield1 object of the Jtextfield class and call the setVisible method with the boolean value as true. But if you wish to make the text field or the text box as invisible, okay, put the boolean value as false here. The next component in the NetBeans window is the button control, and the class which represents that button control is the Jbutton class. The Jbutton class provides the functionality of a push button, and push button is one of the primary component of the graphical user interface. The push button provides the functionality of firing user commands. Now if you see this design window, it consists of a push button control. So here is this push button control, okay, with the text add. Now clicking on this push button identified by the name add, certain statements gets executed. So clicking on this push button acts as an event which initiates certain actions, and the actions execute a set of statements, and upon executing those statements, the title selected from this list box and the name typed in this text box control shall be appended or added into the text area control. So this mouse click on this add push button acts as an event which initiates certain actions that executes a series of statements, due to which the title selected from the list box and the name typed in the text box control gets added into this text area control. So let's take an example. If the title chosen is Mr. and the name typed is Raj, then on clicking this add push button which acts as an event, the title Mr. and the name Raj gets added into this text area control. As a result, this text area control will show the first entry as Mr. Raj. So let's find it out. Let me run this program. Now let's say I choose the title as Mr. and name as Raj. Now if I click on this add push button, I can see the first entry in the text area control as Mr. Raj. Now again, if I wish to add another entry into this text area control, okay, for that again I have to select the title. Now let me choose the title as Mrs. and name as Nancy, okay, and on doing that, if I click this add push button again, I can see the second entry in this text area control as Mrs. Nancy. So this is how this add push button works, and the event generated on clicking this add push button does this operation. Now let's discuss about the properties of the Jbutton class. The first property is the method setText, which sets the text for the button, okay, and for doing that we have to first create an instance or an object of this Jbutton class. Let me denote that object by the name Jbutton1, and with the help of this object I shall use the setText method to set this text, that is, it is nice to learn about swing controls, as the text for this button. Okay, now let's check it out how it is done. Now here it is. This is the push button control with the text add here. Now for that, if I wish to change this text from add to this one, that is, it is nice to learn about swing controls, I have to click on this control and then move over here, that is the properties window, and then check the option text here. Okay, by default it is add. Now I shall change it to it is nice to learn about swing controls, and once I have done that, I shall click this OK button. Okay, now here is this text in the push button. Okay, the previous text that was add has been changed into it is nice to learn swing controls. So this is how this setText method works. Then come to the next method known as the setFont. Now if you wish to set the font of the button control, okay, then use the setFont method. Okay, and for that you have to create an instance of this Jbutton class let's say the instance is Jbutton1, and then call the method setFont and then take the argument, okay, with the help of this new keyword, and then call this package java.awt, and then with the help of this dot operator call this font method. Okay, inside it they have three arguments. The first one is the font family, which is Arial within inverted comma. The second argument 1 represents the font style. Okay, it can be bold, italic or underlined. Now 1 here represents the font style as bold, and the third argument 14 represents the font size. So this statement changes the font of the button control to Arial, the font style as bold and font size as 14. And upon doing this, any text that gets inscribed on the button control will have the font family as Arial, the font style as bold and the font size as 14. Now let's check it out here. At first let me click this button control and check its properties out here. Now see the option font here. Okay, now by default the font family is Tahoma, the font style is plain and the font size is 11. Now let me change the font family to Arial, font style to bold as 1 represents bold and font size to 14. So let me do that here now. So I choose Arial here, and the font style I choose bold as 1 represents bold and the font size as 14. Okay, on doing this you can see the increase in the font size in this displayed preview. Let me click OK. Now can you see the change in the font? The font size of this text inscribed onto this button control has increased to a considerable extent. The text has become bold and the font family has switched to Arial. Then come to the next method called setEnable. Using this method you can enable or disable the button. Okay, if you wish to enable the button, okay, put the boolean value as true, or if you wish to disable the button, put the boolean value as false here. Now see, if I click this add push button and check its properties, by default the enable option is ticked. That means this add push button is enabled by default. Now that it's enabled by default, so if I click this run button and I choose title as Mrs. and name as Nancy, okay, so upon clicking this add push button it initiates an event, okay, which shall perform the operation to store the title Mrs. and the name Nancy into this text area control. Okay, but that was made possible only because the setEnable property of this add push button has been ticked. Now let me disable this add push button. Okay, for that I have to click this add push button again. Now see, instead of ticking that setEnable option, I shall untick it. Okay, so this is the enable option. Now instead of this tick, I shall untick it. Now this button has been disabled. Okay, and once this is disabled, on clicking this application, now I shall not be able to add the title selected and the name that has been typed into this text box. Okay, I shall now not be able to add the title selected from the list box and the name typed from this text box control into this text area control. This is because the add button has been disabled. Okay, now see, even though if I click this add push button, okay, the entry from this list box and this text box is not added into this text area control. Okay, and this you can see clearly here. I am clicking on this add button, but the selected entry from this list box, which is Mr., and the typed entry Nancy from this text box is not getting added into this text area control. Then come over to the next method, which is set visible. Using this method you can make the button visible or invisible. Okay, if you wish to make the button as visible, put the boolean value as true here, okay, for this method set visible, and if you wish to make the button as invisible, put the boolean value as false here for this method set visible for the instance Jbutton1 of the Jbutton class. And with this I end my presentation here.